Let me just start off by saying that I have never been a Hasbro fanboy. However, I am legitimately considering getting a Hasbro tattoo on my left arm, or maybe on my chest near my heart, or maybe on my left ass cheek. I haven't necessarily decided where exactly, but I'm just in love with what Hasbro has been doing over the past couple of months. They've been destroying the third-party marketplace essentially, and destroying a lot of these quote-unquote small businesses, usually like these toy stores that take advantage of people and try to flip figures for like 3 to 4 times profit. Hasbro really doesn't care. They've thrown a grenade. They're watching it implode on itself because they have decided to reissue a bunch of different figures that for the longest time were worth close to like $100 on the secondary market. And as I said, I would walk into a lot of these toy stores and see just walls and walls of these figures going for like hundreds of dollars, even though they probably bought it off of some low-level collector or some collector that was with his back against the wall, maybe for like $20 to $30. But Hasbro is essentially destroying that way of thinking or that way of doing business by just reissuing the figures themselves. This is phenomenal. Now, I'm not going to go through every single figure that's being reissued because that would take forever, but I'll give you guys some of the highlights. Some of these may still be up for pre-order. I would probably check either Hasbro Pulse or maybe Big Bad Toy Store. I wouldn't trust GameStop for anything, but the safest bet would be to try to pre-order one or some of these figures through their websites, and then eventually try finding these at like Best Buy or GameStop. I'm not sure if these are like a fan channel exclusive restock or reissue, but that's what it appears because I've only seen it through like Entertainment Earth, Big Bad Toy Store, GameStop, and a few other stores like that. So that would probably be your best bet. Try to get a pre-order in there, and then try going hunting at like your local GameStop. I believe they should have some of these restocked. As a prime example, I myself was able to find a retro carded reissued Kingpin action figure, that deluxe figure that was released maybe like, I don't know what, 5 years ago now. They decided to reissue that one, and the pre-orders closed up, but I believe like every GameStop store should be receiving at least 1 to 2 of those. So that's just like the first example of many of these reissues going out. Now, I believe there are two trains of thought here. There are a lot of people that are pretty upset because they felt like Hasbro could have easily retooled these figures or done something slightly different, or throw it in a retro carded package, maybe just add a different head sculpt or, slightly different paint job or shading, and then just re-release it. And that way people that already have the originals can already kind of double dip. But there are those that don't really care. They were not able to acquire these figures when they were originally released because the third-party market has priced them out. I mean, in some cases, these figures were going for like, 70 to about 120 to 150, depending on what figure you were looking at. The retro carded Kingpin figure, I believe, was going for somewhere along the lines of like 80 to like maybe $100 online. Then they just recently reissued that Commander Fox, as well as that original Captain Rex action figure from the Black Series line, both of them for roughly about like $30. Obviously, they still gave you the inflation price, which is I think like $25 plus shipping, because most of the places where you could acquire these figures, I believe, was only like fan channels, so you actually have to pay a little bit extra for the shipping. But yeah, you were roughly paying about $30, which is much better than, like, I think Commander Fox was going for about like 70 to 80, and then Rex was going between the lines of like 80 to 120, depending on the condition and things of that nature. But now you can purchase these, pick them up, and like I said, for collectors that maybe just recently got into the hobby or just were not able to find these in store or in person, now you're able to acquire these. They just recently decided to restock that the Commander Obi-Wan with the clone body mold, and then the head sculpt looks phenomenal. I believe this was originally like a Walgreens exclusive, if I'm not mistaken. And then we did get a restock of the retro carded Green Goblin that looks really weird. It has that cross-eyed with those big googly eyes, but yes, you're able to get this figure. This one was a figure that was roughly going for about like 120, I think, pretty consistently. I also tend to frequent GameStop from time to time, and I have already run into at least a couple of those archive Boss Black Series action figures, another perfect example of a figure that was going for astronomically high prices. A lot of it had to do with speculation that he could potentially make an appearance in like one of the newer live action Disney Star Wars projects. But regardless, it is now incredibly affordable for hardcore collectors, and I will say it definitely warms my old heart to think that there are scalpers and some of those smaller toy shops that have taken advantage of collectors really scrambling, trying to sell these figures as quickly as they can before the value drops overall. I do feel like most of these figures will have value consistently for the next decade or so. I think they'll eventually sell out online for the pre-orders that are available right now as of the moment, and eventually we'll kind of go back to a situation that's similar, but at least Hasbro is giving the opportunity to hardcore collectors to pick up these figures. As I said, there were a lot of people that maybe were not collecting back then, and it's also very exciting to speculate about what we could potentially see down the line. Like maybe they decide to re-release that retro carded animated Spider-Man from like 4 to 5 years ago, or better yet, what about that cell shaded retro carded Venom that they released, which I believe was like a Hasbro Pulse exclusive as well. The retro carded Sandman has also gone up in value. Last I checked, it was somewhere along the lines of like $80. And even that retro carded symbiote action figure. They also had those Target exclusive Black Series. I believe it was Anakin, Obi-Wan, and Captain Rex, if I'm not mistaken. That was a tiny little wave that was very limited and was released as an exclusive for Target. That could also be a reissue from Hasbro down the line. So like I said, the possibilities are endless. It's also worth noting that this is a very good idea from Hasbro because there are a lot of knockoffs or a lot of unauthentic product being sold overseas that is being shipped to the States now. Especially a lot of those retro carded animated action figures can be easily reproduced overseas and just, you know, shipped all around. And eventually it's going to be very difficult to be able to tell what the original action figure is compared to a knockoff, especially if they're already opened. There's also a rumor rolling around that there's a small group of individuals that are able to get their hands on like product that just didn't pass the standards of Hasbro, whether they had any issues at QC or beyond, or even before that, like maybe customer complaints or complaints from a lot of the retailers, maybe saying like, hey, this looks off, or maybe damaged packaging. I have no idea. The point is, there is that rumor out there that they're technically official, they're just not approved by Hasbro. There may be some manufacturer defects, but that's neither here nor there. Hasbro is essentially taking the power out of the hands of these scalpers and these individuals that are essentially mass producing these knockoffs, and basically putting that money back into their own pockets where honestly it belongs. I mean, it's their product. They can re-release it whenever it is that they feel like they need to. And I don't feel like this is something that Hasbro has done in the past. And as I've said before, if there's an OM that's doing something good, even if I'm not necessarily like the biggest fan of theirs, I'm still going to sit down and have an entire conversation on it, because I genuinely feel like this is a very good thing that Hasbro is doing. The only thing that I will say, and I guess it is kind of a concern, and I think it will become more of a concern later down the line, which is why I feel like if there are any action figures out there that have gotten like astronomically high in value through the third-party market, and they feel like there's a demand, I genuinely feel like they should jump on that opportunity, because the further away we get from the original release for these action figures, the older the body molds will be, the more outdated the action figures as a whole will be. Maybe the accessories are old, maybe the articulation scheme is just completely outdated, maybe the paint applications were not very good on the original, and so on and so forth. So I think it's genuinely a good thing that Hasbro is doing, but I feel like there's kind of like an expiration date on this idea. They definitely have to take advantage as quickly as they possibly can on this and really capitalize. And obviously I'm aware that this isn't a perfect situation. I already touched on this, but I'll reiterate it. Yes, these are extremely old figures. They're like 4 to 5, maybe 6 years old. And for some unknown reason, Hasbro decided to still make us pay the inflation prices. They're not charging what they were charging when these figures were originally released. They're charging us what their figures cost now, which is kind of an interesting move. It's not perfect, but at least you get a second shot at these figures without having to pay, over $100. It's one of those very few moments where an OM is actually looking out for the collector. They're actually thinking about their consumer base. It's just all around a very refreshing situation. But as always, let me know your thoughts down below. Do you guys feel like this is a good thing? Do you feel like it's a bad thing? Let me know what figures you guys would love to see reissued, figures that maybe are out of circulation, very difficult to find, that maybe have a very high demand or are just really expensive through the third-party marketplace. Let me know. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Make sure that you enjoy the hobby. That's always the most important part about all of this. Sometimes we forget to enjoy the hobby, to just, play with your action figures, pose them, enjoy them. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. I'll see you guys in the next one. Thank you.